by the studio, and first we're going to have roll call. And if each member of the meeting would like to say who they are, feel welcome to do so. I'm Gar Morse, 11 Jersey Lane, Manchester.
Sandy Bodmer Turner, 89 School Street.
Sarah Melvin,
Sue Gilbert, 17 Loading Place Road.
Richard Smith, 13 Washington Street.
Michael Pratt, 79 Bridge Street.
Ann Harrison, 13 Tux Point Road.
Denny Hall, 20 Masconoma Street.
And that's all the members.
That's the members. Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge the receipt of any correspondence. My understanding is there has been no correspondence. Does anybody have any correspondence I didn't know about? No, there is no correspondence. And now I'm going to call on our town planner, Betsy Ware, if she wants to be called on.
Okay.
To summarize the status of where we are.
The status of where we are is, we had a subcommittee meeting last week to talk about communications. So Tiffany Marletta is here tonight to talk about communications, the communications plan. I, in the meantime, am working on a draft for a scope of services for a consultant, and I just talked with the town administrator on that, and I will get that to him probably tomorrow morning, and we will try to move forward on honing that down. So we're not doing a request for proposals. We're basically doing, we're sending it out to about 6 or 8 tried and true consultants who've done this type of work, and we're specifically asking them to assist with the there's a compliance program that the state wants everybody to use. So I don't have familiarity with that program. So basically somebody who has the skill set to do that. So we should be able to get that moving fairly soon. The other issue is Sandy and Gail Hunter and I have been working on the figuring out of units for how many units, residential units are in the half-mile radius. And the good news is that the assessor's office has been terrific. And we're gonna try to set up a meeting next week because there's a couple of glitches here and there, but you know, they're not insurmountable, and I think we can work on that. But I independently took my little map and went around door to door, and my figure is within 20 units of the assessor's database for a half-mile radius.
What would the guesstimate total be of number of units in the half-mile radius? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, maybe we should have a guesstimate contest here. So within the half-mile radius, the abutters list came to 895. And my figure came to 872. So I'm not too far off. And I acknowledge that there are some things that have been missed. So I think we're pretty close. And we're getting a revised database with lot sizes. And what I did find out today was that there is not a large zoning map of the town. Like, if somebody wanted to just, I mean, it's kind of antiquated to think of a paper plan, but there is, I went to the town clerk she gave me something this size.
Oh,
I
gee.
went to the building inspector's office, they gave me something this size.
Yeah.
So, it's, obviously, we're gonna need something for presentation purposes, so, anyhow, that's on the radar.
Oh, I thought that some large charts were done for an open house before the zoning, before some zoning amendments. There were
Might have been
posters,
before my time,
it was before your time,
okay,
but there were poster sized sections. There was a meeting at the school.
I don't know where those went.
Ask,
You can ask Chris or,
no, it would, the person, I think the person to ask would be Sarah Creighton.
Okay. Okay,
I have a large.
pardon?
All the planning board members have a large.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it does exist, okay. Because the plan that's on the website does not differentiate between D1 and D2. The overlay district, so that's one of the things on my list that, will need to get corrected.
do you have a digital version of it by any chance, or is it? just a paper copy?
I could look, I think my version does distinguish D1 and D2, but.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm realizing along the way is there's some questions, but none of them is insurmountable.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
So what, I'm just, that number of units that you count or counted and compared with the assessor, what is that to give us density or?
basically gives us the number of units that presently exist in that radius and, where they are. And, what's kind of interesting to me is there's not a lot of three families. Even the three families are in the general district, but pretty much not anywhere else. And, so we need to kind of take a look at those. Anything bigger than a three family and try to figure out, how that would integrate in.
Right, but I'm just trying to figure out how that number is relevant. Is that just the base? You're saying if you take that plus the additional number, so that's giving us like a fractional percentage potential increase or?
Well, it could do that. I mean, it's close to 900 parcels. Some of those parcels don't have buildings on them. So, anyhow, so I'm looking, so we would be looking at, a percentage of density. We'd be looking at a number of different issues.
You can use it however you want.
Yeah, no, I'm
And
just
the-
trying to understand how.
Yeah.
How I take.
Well,
that
I think
number.
we need to know where we are before we can get there. Yeah,
But those numbers are without regard to the underlying zoning.
no, I've calculated it per zoning district.
Yeah,
So
but you
you've
don't,
got it.
you haven't looked at which lots are conformed.
No, that's coming, right, that's the
Yeah.
next meeting.
It's good that the numbers are close because that's, I mean, if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Betsy, but what Betsy was doing was kind of QAing because like any database, there are anomalies and things. And so that
Yeah.
came out pretty close is a
Yeah.
good thing.
Well, I think the confusion may be that, I mean, our objective is to find acreage.
Right. Right,
I did a quick breakdown of current density by street off the GIS database. And, most of our general district is well under half the density required by the MBTA is my first cut. I think it's hard for me to connect number of units to our requirement, which is number of acres. I'm just a little confused by that.
right.
Remind me again what this zoning, MBTA zoning bylaw requires asking. Somebody.
They're asking for the potential for some form of assurance from Manchester. The state is asking for some form of assurance from Manchester by the Sea that 555 units could be potentially created by right within some of those units within half a mile of the train station and some of those units outside the area. So their calculation is that roughly 15 acres within that half-mile radius needs to be zoned for 15 units an acre. And then outside the district, 20 plus acres could also be zoned that way.
But I think,
But there's no performance standard.
Yeah, we don't have to
So-
start building it.
Right, that's exactly.
but the thing we can't lose sight of is that the zoning is based on lots. And many of the lots are non-conforming, so it's fine to say there's 800 units. But the question is, once you deep diving, based on lots, what do you come up with and what can you include and what can't you
And how
include and how can you tweak it so that you can include everything?
So
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
That's
Indeed.
because the question is, the fundamental question is, how many multifamily units are there within that radius? And then I think most of them are likely to not pass muster in terms of the zoning. And so,
Conforming.
yes, correct, that's correct. And so then the question is, the question Sarah referenced, which is, how do you tweak it? Do you want to tweak it? What, to make it.
So can I ask for a clarification, because I may have misunderstood. I thought that we had to come up with a total acreage supporting 15 units per acre throughout that zoning identified. Is that not correct?
I think that's the law, but I think the thing we have to be careful of is we don't want to just say, we're gonna take these 15 acres and let a developer build everything they want.
Well, of course not, but in
Anything
terms
they
of.
want. So by doing it by lot size,
Well, of course, but
narrowing it.
the question I'm asking maybe is a little different, because what I'm trying to understand is, do we not have to find a total of 34 acres zoned by right for 15 units per acre, regardless of what's built there?
My read of the guidelines is yes. Because unless we can, I'm not sure, and I have this question submitted to the state. We can't, I don't believe we can take existing multifamilies and now rezone them so they would be by right.
So the only advantage we get from having existing high-density housing would be obtained if we were able to gerrymander the zone to include those housing developments. So for example, if we have a development on Summer Street that has high density, and that happens to be part of the zone that we allocate to the MBTA zoning, then we gain benefit from it.
Right.
But regardless of how many units are built in whatever area we take, we must come up with 34 acres. And each one of those acres, regardless of the lots inside them, or regardless of anything else, has to be capable of 15 units per that acre. I mean, well, I guess it is include the lots. because-
It's an
And
average.
so, one of the things you might think about is saying, okay, say all of the existing lots in the general district are conforming by right today. Any new lot needs to be 6,000 square feet. We allow the 3 units already in the existing structure.
I will point out that if you did that, you would double the traffic density in downtown.
Well, yes,
What I found interesting in the research that I did is in all of the districts except the G district, there were very few 3 families.
because we don't allow them.
Pardon? Very few 3 families.
Right.
We've never
And-
allowed them.
Right,
But,
lots of
but,
two-family.
but part of the issue with the 3 families is that you have to provide 5 parking spaces. So on a 6,000 square foot lot, it's close to impossible.
Well, you have to look at the parking regulations too. You don't have to keep the
Right.
5.
Right, right.
You also have to look at what happens if you go outside the tiny lots in the general district. Because when you get into 1 and 2 acre lots, you're talking about developments of 15 and 30 units. You're no longer talking about 3 families.
But that being stated, you can work on design guidelines. So the buildings are broken up, so they look like, you know, more modest or, you know,
Yeah,
so
I didn't mean to-
visually,
I didn't mean to speak negatively about that at all.
no,
mean,
I think
we're-
it can work
it's an officer's
visually.
choice.
How would design regulations work? We don't, as far as I know, except for the regulations in the historic district.
So at present, there aren't design regulations, and that's something that Richard has been, I've been funneling him design guidelines. And basically, design guidelines would go with site plan review, so that the planning board would be looking at, so a development comes in, the development has to be by right. However, the planning board can go through site plan review and design review. And site plan review is to address things like stormwater
Yep.
and lighting and, you know, water and sewer and all of that, all of those elements. But
I think
then-
we've got all of those elements pretty much covered.
Yeah, but then there would be a design review on top of that, where,
What part of our bylaws or zoning or where does design review fit?
design review presently does not exist, however, would be created to work with this bylaw.
I guess my
Are these
question
all
is,
related?
does this have to be approved by town meeting?
Yes.
Yes, Chris passed along to me some sample guidelines, and they're very technical. They're very complex. And you can see why they'd have to be, right? Because you're trying to create general law essentially for new development. And my concern at the last meeting was that it seems like we would be unwise not to have guidelines in place, given the massive change we're about to make. And if that's the case, we'd better have them in place for the same town meeting that approves these for 2 reasons. One is because they've got to go through town meeting, and 2, because they've got to go through mass housing. Because they're not just gonna let us drop any guideline we want on top of the plan that they've already approved for high density housing.
Although there have been some communities like Lexington and Bedford that have adopted design review guidelines after they've adopted them as regulations.
Their representative town meeting counts.
Probably.
Yeah, so we,
And Betsy, did they have to get those approved by mass housing or
Yeah.
whatever it's
Yeah.
called now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had to go back to mass housing, which had approved their plan, and get those guidelines approved.
Yeah.
Because there's no guarantee you're going to get them approved.
Better to go together.
Can you just give me a couple examples of design, like, just so I can visualize,
Like
are we
the-
talking a height restriction? a
Like
style
height
of the home?
restrictions, scale of the buildings. I mean, instead of like a big blocky massive building, the building surfaces are kind of set back so that there's a lot of difference in the sidewall, controls on what they use for roofing materials, chimney materials, foundation materials. I think what most communities have done is looked at the characteristics that they like to see within their community and fold some of that in.
Kind of like the townhouses on Summer Street.
Yeah, I mean, a height restriction makes sense, pretty black and white, right? You got
Right,
30 foot or
right,
whatever it is,
right.
it's black and white. Some of the other stuff you talked about, like foundation materials, I mean.
But so, for example, the houses that are built on Brook Street and Summer Street that used to be Wedelo's Florist. Those, you know, fit right in with the immediate neighborhood. So, the houses that were built on, Vine Street where, Magnuson Florist used to be. Those look pretty nice in terms of how they fit in. They're not monster houses. The scale of the houses is appropriate for the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm just saying there's some things that I can visualize being codified, you know what I mean? Like a height
Yeah.
restriction, that's pretty, boom,
Right,
that many
right.
feet. Some of the other things you're talking about sound more. Okay,
I can share Chris's examples, which are 3 different towns, examples to anyone who's interested.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, a long time ago, there was a development on Cape Cod called New Seabury. It became famous for creating a cottage type of
Yeah.
environment, which was very consistent with sort of Cape Cod cottages. And they built huge number of units with remarkable amount of density, but some of them were 0 lot line. Some of them had less than significant setbacks. And if you go down and look at that, it's a very pleasant environment. So it won many awards for, not just for number of units, but for actually aesthetics and for human scale.
yeah.
Where is it on the
It's
page?
called New Seabury. It's kind of near Hyannis, maybe.
Near Hyannis?
I think they're near Hyannis.
So in,
No,
it's-
no, not right.
so in the example he's
It's
talking
closer to
about,
Mashpee.
Mashpee.
when we think
yeah,
of
yeah,
Cape
Mashpee.
Cod, we think of, gray shingles and, kind of nice landscaping. And so all of the things that are in that development are what are kind of typical Cape Cod.
yeah, I mean, I guess
So-
my take will be, I guess it can be done, because to your point, if they all look like Cape Cod cottages, then they found a way, but I can't
Right.
wrap my brain around how you put that in black and white and like,
Right.
each
Right.
house has to look like a Cape Cod house. Well, okay, that makes sense. But how do they-
There's certain, you don't want everything to look totally cookie cutter.
That makes sense for a bigger development, but my concern is trying to keep a lot conform with the regulation by keeping a lot of it on the smaller lots and not
Right.
having
Yes.
big developments come
Right.
in.
Yeah.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
wouldn't really need design
I
criteria.
mean, I was actually stunned that there are, when I started looking at the lot sizes particularly in the G and the D districts, I mean, you've got lot sizes that are 3,000 square feet,
Right.
2,500 square feet, which is a pretty small lot.
Most of the streets in the general district towards the downtown have a current density around 7, between 7 and 9 units per acre, if you look at it just from the first pass I took.
Hmm.
So that gives you some idea of where you're at, but
I hate to interrupt, but I think we should move on to the next item on the agenda, if that's okay with everybody. And we're at the outreach and communication plan. And there was a subcommittee meeting, including Sandy, Sue Philbrick, me, and Betsy, of course, Gail Hunter, and Tiffany, of course. And so Tiffany has done a plan, I think, which may have been available to everybody. And I'd like to ask her to walk us through where she is on that.
Sure. Getting here. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. So I put together this communications strategy and outreach and communication plan for this particular project of MBTA zoning. And I just wanted to walk you through the strategy that I have here. So on the first page, it's a brief overview, and I broke it down by who is our target audience, what is the purpose, being clear about what is our purpose, what is the result that we're intending to get from this outreach, and what messaging are we going to create to come to our result, the timing and delivery, and what communications channels will we use to disseminate the information that we need to reach all residents with. So when I was thinking about how we could break this down, I thought about, our town and, the demographics of our residents and businesses, and really the time that I was thinking of people's time and the time that they have to attend meetings and the kind of outreach. I think at different places in times and seasons of our lives, we want to receive our information in different ways, and we have different availability for that. So that's how I started to break down how we're going to attack this. So the purpose of this plan is to reach every resident and to inform and educate them about the new Massachusetts zoning law, Section 3A of the Zoning Act regarding MBTA zoning. And in the end, if we're successful, residents will cast a confident and informed vote at a 2024 town meeting. In order to do this and to reach each resident, we need to create a variety of resources for them to learn about this new MBTA zoning law and what its impacts will be on Manchester. It's very important that we explain clearly what it means if Manchester adopts this new zoning law, and what it means if we do not. Things have changed over the past year. New guidelines have come out from the state, and it's become clear that it's more of a mandate at this point, and we need to make those new facts that have come out clear to residents, and what choices that we have before us. My goal as support to the task force will be to boil down a lot of information and make it understandable and informative to residents. Let's see. So yeah, I think it's important that our communications are well timed and purposeful. I do think this is a really important point. I don't think we should just be talking and planning, inundating residents and overwhelming them with drafts of information and updates. I think it should be clear. It should be very purposeful and at strategic points along this process in the next year, to avoid confusion and having old versions of things out there. And and then the communications channels, you can see there, these are the mediums that we have as a town and that we use every week. And then I'll walk you through a more customized plan right now. All right, so MBTA zoning community engagement. It should be a setting where residents and stakeholders want to return to. We want people to come back to the meetings. We want them to come to the public forums and return to the public forums. We want them to leave feeling like they were informed and their questions were answered, and they'll seek to return when we have more information to share with them. And we want to provide opportunities for them. It should be welcoming and inclusive. I think we're going to have different opinions on zoning and what we should do. And we should just make sure that we are encouraging participation of all sides. And so
this is so important.
mhm.
We're obliged, I think, to make this a message that people want to find out about,
Mhm.
and that we stick to facts and not just give them a point of view about what's going to happen.
Yep.
And what you're talking about is just that. So I
Yes.
think that's absolutely great.
And I truly believe that, and that's how I approach all of my communications work with the town is keep it fact-based, keep any personal opinions or bias out of it. And that will be my goal on this project is to really make sure that the information we present is follows, you know, that idea. And I do think it helps avoid confusion too. So just take the facts and our research. So we're gonna break it down into 3 phases. It's a big task, it's a big project. So this is how I sort of chose to break it down over the next year. And the deadline, as we all know, is next December. So phase 1 will be the MBTS baseline. And I envision this fall to take place this fall. I'd like to just get everybody in town on the same page and use this time to really educate people. I don't think this is on everybody's radar yet. I think I would like to bring everybody along and make sure that they understand what this new law is, what the current guidelines are for the state, what the current mandate is from the state, what the consequences are, and what are the consequences if we were to say no. And really, I want the town to have an understanding on is what we're going to submit and when, and have an idea of what the residents are going to have a chance to vote on and what their role is in this, and to gather feedback from them. So really just, what do we currently have in Manchester? Do we already comply? Answer a lot of the common questions.
Do we have a current housing inventory? I don't think so.
Well, we were kind of talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
By the time we do our first public forum,
It's already September.
We do have an inventory. The question is how,
Do
the
we have-
quality of the data.
Well, and I don't think it's an inventory of the whole town. So,
I don't know, what was produced for what was in the radius
Yeah.
was pretty complete. I would
no,
assume.
okay. This suggests the current housing inventory in Manchester, not the current housing inventory in the half-mile circle.
All I was saying, Ann, is that what was produced fairly quickly by the assessor's office for the radius
Mhm.
was pretty complete in terms of parcel size and parcel ID and all of that. And I assume, since this is, the circle is a whole new thing, they could do it for the whole town also.
Yeah, how would the assessor not have the answer to that first question?
Very good question.
It's in the Mass GIS database.
Yeah.
Download.
Yeah.
We-
Okay.
I mean, I think that the database is the,
Well, the
My
question is
next
how
question
accurate is
is-
their.
Is that
Because there's
at
some
all
pretty
relevant to the
different
current
ones.
discussion? Is an inventory of the whole town relevant to the discussion?
No.
I'm confused about this. That does not seem to me to be the central issue of relevance, our current inventory. The law doesn't care about our current inventory.
Well,
Yeah, but it
I
gives
don't know
people
about that.
perspective.
Right.
it would
And
be
it
good for
also
them
helps
to
you
know what we
determine
have.
which ones can comply.
How does it give them perspective?
Well, if they understand where the homes are, how many there are, they
How many we
need to
need.
understand where they live, you know. It,
If I wanted perspective, I'd want to know how many new housing units have to come into Manchester to satisfy this law, and we don't know that answer.
Well, we
And
don't know the
where?
answer, and part of the reason we don't know is because of the question Betsy raised earlier, which is, does the state, if we have, let's say, 400 units in multifamily housing in the town, do those count toward the 555? And I hope the answer to that is yes. They're not saying 555 new, is my belief,
Right.
reading the guidelines. It's 555 total, some of which have to be within the circle and some of which can be elsewhere.
But it's my understanding, if you're going to count them, then you have to adjust the zoning.
Exactly.
So they're
Correct.
no longer
That is
non-conforming.
correct,
So
but the question is,
But that's the key question,
right.
My suggestion is that rather than what is the current housing inventory, what are some examples of 15 units per acre that exist in town? I think that would be much more interesting to people.
I vote yes to both.
To both.
Yeah,
So-
To both,
and
it's both and.
so my only reservation about giving everybody a list is, I don't want to feel like I'm targeting certain property owners in any way. So, I mean, I could tell you right now that the Powder House Lane apartments are 29 units on 2 acres, so that's 15 units an acre.
I'm not
You
sure
know?
that's the picture we want, but I think there are other pictures. I think there are other pictures there are other developments that are that dense,
Yeah,
that do reflect what we would
Yeah.
like Manchester
Yeah.
to look at like. And
Does it help to paint, to give the all of the information or just have it accessible? The housing inventory, because half of it will be downtown, but do we know where the other half of the units are going to go? Or where we're going to, do we know
No.
that yet?
That's what we're
No.
trying to
Would it be
do.
helpful to have all
But
the big
and
picture?
there were pictures in the FAQ, there are photographs in the
Mhm.
FAQ that Chris pulled together.
Yeah.
That showed you photographs.
yes,
I thought the FAQ was excellent. And-
Yes.
and I think,
Yeah,
you know, if we
So the
stick to,
questions,
we stick to the bones of the law, which is we've got to have this many acres inside, we've got to have this many acres outside. It's got to be zoned by right. That seems to me a good thing. And I also don't like this question we keep asking about, do we already comply? We know darn well we don't comply.
Mhm.
And do we already comply infers to anybody who looks at this, that there may not be any issue at all. But we all know there is.
We do know, I mean, I guess the question is, what if all of the non-conforming units
Right.
conform?
They don't.
No,
I
we
know
changed the
that.
zoning, so they do.
But then then we don't comply. The question is, do we already comply is now? If we change the zoning, of course we'll comply, but we do not comply.
Okay, so
You're assuming,
feel like
though,
that's
you're
a
assuming
debatable
that you're not gonna get, the units that could be grandfathered.
Look, that's a zoning change. Okay, there's gonna be a zoning change, whether we change the zoning for parking units or grandfathering or whatever we do, that's a change. Right now, we don't comply.
And will the state allow
And,
that?
and the reason I
Yes, if you
keep,
make them
grandfather.
conforming.
the reason I keep bringing this up is because everyone here seems to be talking about a change to the downtown of simply allowing 3 families, doing away with the parking, et cetera. That's a huge change.
yes, it is.
And that would choke the downtown with cars like you can't believe. Over half of the downtown is over 100 years old. You'd be wiping it out if you zoned it
But if
differently.
you,
So this is just not, it's just misleading to say we comply.
yeah, but if you look at the other side of the coin, we've allowed 3 units by right in the general district for 40 or 50 years and nothing's been built.
I'm sorry. I
Nothing's been built
totally
because you can't
disagree
comply with
that.
the parking
I
requirement.
totally disagree with that. It's misleading to say that we've allowed 3 units by right when tacked onto that is a requirement for 5 parking spaces. And more than that, a grandfather law, which prevents you from being able to tear down the house. So there's no way that the houses in the general district have been zoned for 3 families for 40 years. They've been zoned for 3 units only if they can come up with 5 parking spaces. Walk down Washington Street or Norwood and tell me how many of those houses could come up with 5 parking spaces and convert to a 3 family. And they can't tear down the house because then they don't conform. So we do not have zoning.
Under the
For
zoning,
families.
it's by right. I'm sorry, but.
Well, what about the 5 units? Is that just not there?
you mean the 5 spaces?
5 spaces.
5 spaces.
Is that just not part of that
well,
by right?
maybe you make
I'm
it,
not sure whether it is or not.
maybe
It's
you
not.
make it,
It's what I read.
maybe you make it by right as it is. So if there's something there, so you don't change anything, so you do what I would call preservation zoning. So you look at a lot, you say, we'll make Gar the the
Make me-
sample.
Sure, go ahead, go ahead, have at me.
Okay, so his unit has 7
7
units
and an office.
and an office
parking.
and 1 parking space.
Well, no.
Per unit.
We have a whole bunch of parking spaces on the land that we own next door.
Oh,
There's
okay,
parking.
all right, so you've got parking.
So, but it's
Okay.
1 parking space per unit versus
Yeah.
2 for a
We have one-
residential.
Well, there you go.
We have
So-
1 per unit. Okay, so so anything that gets built there has to meet that standard and nothing else.
I'm
And
just
then
saying,
across the street from me, there are 2 houses that happen to now be separate lots. But the total acreage is about 3,000 square feet. There's 2 houses and there's parking for 5 cars.
well, look,
So-
the only point I'm trying to make is that I do not accept the fact that we have a general district zoned by right for 3-family period. We have a
We
general
don't.
district zoned for 3-family by right with 5 parking spaces. And
we
and
can-
add to that, even more important, because I'll tell you, if you could tear down existing non-compliant units in the general district and throw up a 3 or 4 unit property that would support, people would be doing it because it would be economically viable. It's happened in other communities. The only reason it hasn't happened here is because they're non-compliant.
I've actually modeled that up because I'd love to do that. I'd like to tear down, but no, it's touch and go. It's really not economically viable. Now that rents have gone from $3,000 a month to $9,000 a month, then, oh, yeah,
You know,
the juices start to flow.
My model, and I grant you, it's a little different, but my model is in Seattle, Fremont area, where the prices of the houses previous are about the same as the prices here, and the prices of the buildings being built in place of them are not too far from the ones that we have here. So you may be right, we may be borderline, but that could happen. At any rate, my central point is, we don't comply right now.
Yeah, that
Well,
goes back to that question. I mean, that's
can
a
we go
simple
back to
yes or
those-
no. My understanding is no, right?
Can we,
But I
can we
see, I
go
feel like
back?
I've
to-
heard different takes
Can
on
we
it, so that's why
talk
I
one
put it in
person at a
here.
time?
May I make a suggestion about how to amend the slide, which is to have the second point be the third, what are the current state guidelines? And then the third be, not do we already comply, but what's required to comply? What do we need to do to comply?
Yeah, okay. Tiffany, why don't you take it from here?
Saba? Yeah, okay.
And I'm glad we have this talk because clearly there is some, even amongst us, talking about this. And so this is why I added this to this slide, because I do feel like that's a question in the past year when top articles have been written, there have been, people do have an assumption that we might already fit into the requirement somehow, some way. And that's a question I want to answer right off the bat. And I think that's important, that's as our baseline is to, and just assume that people are just tuning in and get, those basics out of the way. Bring everybody onto the same page, so. And I have heard different answers to that. I've asked a few different people in here, so that's an alarm bell went off. So I feel like that is something we need to confirm, and that's a fact that we need to.
And I
Sure.
think that one thing, as I read this regulation, it doesn't have to be 100% doable. The zoning has to support it. But that doesn't mean that every single lot can physically add the number of parking spaces that are required, as long as it's reasonable.
Yeah, it does when you look at an acre that has to support 50, it doesn't mean that every lot within that acre has to be at that density. It's just that overall
Average.
zoning area has to be at that.
Well, you have to have the zoning per lot that
Would support
complies in order to
total.
count it.
Right, so you
Yes.
could have conceivably one area where it's far less than 15 units per acre in the same area, just
Right.
because of the restrictions, but another
It's
instance.
more, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, it's an average.
Okay, keep going, Tiffany.
So for phase one, my plan I broke it down into community outreach and communication. So there will be 2 MBTA task force meetings per month, in which the task force will allow public flow of information, question and answer. That's important. 2 planning board meetings per month, where there'll be an MBTA zoning status report presented at each meeting. And then we'll do a fall public forum. And we talked about dates earlier this week, and we had settled on trying a Saturday when people are off of work. Hoping it's a nice, fall day where we can encourage people to get outside. One idea I had was using the town common. It's beautiful, it's downtown, it's right in the district, in the area that we are going to be talking about. And conclude the presentation with a walking tour of downtown. That was an idea that Chris had. So people that would like to join can have a visual of the area that we're talking about. And then circulate, sort of put together a presentation, a canned presentation just for phase 1 of the baseline, and have materials and poster boards and maps and everything we need to present and clearly educate the public on where we're at, what the state mandate is, and what the choices are before us. And then the plan would be to circulate to different groups in towns, sort of meet residents where they are, have a discussion. And here are listed some ideas of places where that might be good options for the task force to present at. And then as far as communication, aside from in-person events, we'll use the town social media, town communication channels, social media. We have a quarterly newsletter, and Betsy's already written the first. We'll take advantage of the quarterly newsletter all year this year. It gets mailed to every taxpayer within their tax bill, and it also gets posted online. So it's a good resource, and for each of these phases, the hope is that the task force will write a recap, an update, status update of where things are. Just another way to reach people.
Is this phase 1 going to include any suggestions about what might be viable? I mean, I'm concerned that you're going to have a phase 1 and people are going to be walking around a town that they know well and still not have any context of what the density requirement means. I mean, I think that's the thing that's scaring people, is a density requirement, and the 6,000 square feet lot complies.
think
I mean,
that's-
people need to
yeah.
understand those
Yeah.
pieces too.
And that will be important to talk about, like, I think all of those points, when we're putting together the presentation and what essential information is important, that will be, under advisement from the task force. We will, come up with what's essential to get out in this phase. What do they need to know? The basics of, what are the state guidelines? What do we have to create here
But it's
to
also
satisfy?
what it means to them. It's not just the
Right,
guidelines.
right.
it's the-
Right.
Maybe what you're saying, Sarah, maybe what the focus of any walk around should be what both Ann and Sarah were saying, which is to focus on density. This is what this density looks like. This is
And I
what
think
that
that was
density
the
looks
point
like.
of
And then people
Chris's
have
walking
a
tour,
feel for it.
was to show, look at this lot here is this. And I think that was the point of what,
I think it's an excellent
connect.
idea, but again, probably following my own agenda here. I would also point out what the existing density of streets that people know and love are. Because it's one thing to look at a high density development like Summer Street and say, oh, fine, that's not so bad. But then look at Norwood Street or North Street. You walk down North Street, you think it's crowded and dense, don't you? It's half the MBTA density requirement. And the houses are jammed right up next to it.
I didn't say they're jammed up next to each other.
Yeah.
They have yards.
What would your suggestion be? How to convey that?
I would suggest that if you want to give people a picture of what their town looks like, give a couple of examples of streets and their density. You know, you could pick a couple, some are relatively low, for example, Vine Street, bigger yards than North Street, much less, you know, that's a lower density. Norwood Street, which again, I think if I recall right, is somewhere around 7 to 8.
Elm
units
Street,
units per
Your house.
I think Bennett Street on the
Yeah.
general district side conforms.
What?
I think Bennett Street on the general district side conforms. It's got A on one side and general district on the other side.
So maybe if a walking tour map is put together, then
Yes.
we can
They're
find
very small
those
lots.
streets that hit those buttons and create, that'll be all, that's great, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't have numbers that I would want to go to court with.
Sure,
But
yeah.
I don't think it comes close.
Oh, it must.
What do you think of Washington Street, where I live is? That seems pretty dense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About half the 15 unit
Yeah.
units.
But I don't think we want to stress that particularly. I
Well-
don't think we want to get people all riled up.
I think we don't want to be Pollyannish. I think this is my objection to the, do we comply? I think we are headed into a rougher go than some of the members here may think. This is a very tough, I think there's a line in there somewhere about how do we make sure that this is to the benefit of the town? I don't know that it's to the benefit of the town. It's a requirement we gotta do. I don't doubt that. But we don't know this is gonna make the town better. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
Well, I mean, there was what, 2-3 years of work on a master plan? And there was general agreement that one of the
That's not
objectives
this
for the,
law.
no, one of the objectives, Richard, was let's have more different
Okay,
types
but
of
we're not
housing.
talking about the master plan. We're talking about an MBTA plan that requires 37 acres at 500 units, 15 units per acre. That's a completely different rule.
Well, let's see.
Anyway. we don't need
I
to-
think the jury's out.
I do too.
Yeah,
I think
the
the jury's,
jury is
Those
out.
are two very different things, like,
No, they are very much,
this is a
they could
specific
be
state
aligned
law.
or not.
This is a specific state law.
It is.
Yes.
That's the master plan said, yeah, we'd like to develop more housing. I mean,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are two.
I agree.
Well, but
We
there-
want to be we want to see the best in this we possibly can. But I
Yes.
just don't want to caution that I think there's going to be some rough sledding here.
There may well be. However, in my experience in business at least, it's better to plan for what might happen in the future than do nothing and then wait and see.
Absolutely, but the worst thing to do is for us to paint a picture that's prettier than it
Well,
ends up
I
to
think
be.
we need to be very factual.
Absolutely, I agree
And, you
too.
know, I think
And
we
very
tell the
clear.
truth.
Very clear that the
But-
states have changed over the past year too with the mandate.
And
It's
then- That's
a
right.
little,
But I
that's
think for
important.
us to sort of say, well, it's impossible, we're just not gonna do it. We're not gonna play in that game. Well, guess what?
I'm not, who
No.
suggested that?
Exactly right. I agree with you. I think we've gotta play, and we've gotta play with the best team and the best strategy that we can come up with. And we've gotta get the people who are interested and who will vote to understand that.
I'm so enthusiastic about this plan because it's absolutely necessary that we get as many people into this and interested
Yes.
in this as possible. I just don't.
We all want the best outcome. We're all on the same
Yep.
team and we all want Manchester, what we love about Manchester to stay that way. And that's what we need to, what we're all here for, working towards. So,
And
sorry, hopefully, no, sorry.
part of gathering the whole picture, the total inventory, what is the state of play in each of our districts, is so that as we're parsing all of this out and trying to come up with the best plan for our town, you know, we need to advocate for our town.
Yes.
If we need to go, you know, enlist our state representative, our state senator, you know, members of our town government, you know, advocate for our town with the state where we have the best of intentions. This is our topography. This is how we're laid out. These are our protected spaces. You know, having the best data possible for the entire town is only going to help us make a case if we decide that we want to with the state to get a little more flexibility. And I think we have to do that because when we go to town meeting with changes, recommending zoning changes or whatever changes we're recommending, we have to have the credibility that we have looked at every possible option. We've gone back to the state, we've enlisted all the resources we can, and here's what we've come up with. Now, town, yay or nay. But it's important to get the whole picture of the entire town in order to maintain that credibility and be able to use the data to our best advantage.
There's a lot of very good points there. And I will say something I said the last time. I can't believe how short a time we are.
Yeah,
It is what
I
it
can't
is.
believe how short of time we are.
Yeah.
If you look at where we started and how far we've gotten and how far we have to go, I think we should be in a panic.
Okay. Agree.
So, right, so phase one is really alerting the town, like, this is happening, this is upon us, this is now a mandate. And here are here's where we're at, this is what we have. And so, and then during this time, we'll have consultants onboarding and research studies in the works during this time where we're educating the public on, hey, this is what MBTA zoning is all about. And this is why you should tune in and pay attention and phase two. I envision and some of the timeline will shift and be fluid because as we receive information, things will change a little bit. But between December and May, some potential questions that we will answer during this period are hopefully some good solid results from the consultant studies. Really narrowing down exactly the options that we'll be weighing and asking residents to weigh, what zoning changes will be needed for each option, and when will residents vote. I think that's important to just make that clear. What are they going to be asked to vote on, and when we know it, and not necessarily exactly what they're going to be asked to vote on during this period, but make it clear. Are they voting? I think there is some confusion. Are they voting to adopt this, saying yes to the state and no to the state, or are we beyond that? Are we now moving towards, are we voting, the residents will be voting on proposed zoning changes?
But isn't that a yay or a nay vote based on whether they
Right, right.
adopt the zoning changes or
Right.
not? I mean,
I
Right.
think Tiffany's point, though, is that people have a more simplistic view of it in their mind. They think there's still a choice to
Right.
not comply with the law.
Right.
So we give them, here's what we've come up with based upon all our work. We would like these things adopted, and here are the consequences if we don't. It's more nuanced than just yes or no.
It's bringing everybody along and the people, people are at different stages of their awareness of this. And I do think there's it's like, 40B, can we just say no? There are people that don't have a lot of time to dive deep into the subject matter. So I think it's important to be clear about that. And
But by the time it gets to a town meeting vote, for that person voting, it's a yay or nay, right?
That's true. I
Yes.
mean, there will still
I
be.
mean,
people
that's all I'm saying, right? We will have done a lot of work, we will have done a lot of recommendations about design guidelines, all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, the person that's voting at town meeting is doing a yay or nay, right?
do you mean like to one question? Do we adopt the state mandate or no? Is that what you
What's
mean
more,
when you say that?
For the zoning change.
Do you adopt the zoning change that
Zoning,
this group or whatever
Right.
represents?
right.
But then they
Just like
say,
any other zoning
but
change.
then they say yay or nay, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They have the option, of amending it.
That's true. Good
They can
point.
amend.
And it's,
Good luck with that.
You don't like amending on town meeting for now.
on his toes.
Oh, I know they have, but.
But I
it's-
think
it's-
my,
Can't not take amendments.
I know,
No,
but
I'm
we
not
need to
saying
have
that.
done our homework
yes,
so that we're explaining why we came up
with the solutions you
The
did.
Right.
We
solution,
need to have
so that
accountability.
people understand.
If you
Yeah.
get into really
Yeah.
serious changes, you could have a week of time.
Like, we could.
So, the plan for phase two will be similar, similar format with two MBTA zoning task force meetings with Q&A, always available to planning board meetings, status reports, and then during this phase, we'll anticipate possibly some planning board public hearings on proposed zoning amendments, zoning changes. We'll host a few winter public forums after the holidays. One we'll do in person, and I anticipate one on Zoom only, just given the time of year and people's ability to get out in the weather and the cold, just making that available. Another idea is, and we could take this or leave it. We do have the ability to create a survey, and we can decide how much or how little to ask residents, and what, and it could provide important feedback on potential zoning amendments, and sort of take the temperature of where residents are with some of these ideas. And we have the ability to do that. So just putting that out there to the task force.
Doesn't it seem like that would be pretty necessary, since we're taking this thing to town meeting, and the whole state of the town depends upon whether people approve our zoning proposal or not? I mean, if we haven't sold it,
Right.
and if we aren't confident that people are gonna approve it, we're gonna create a big mess.
Well, and I think the problem is today that residents don't have a clue what's in the zoning ordinance. And so it's somehow getting out from under those bylaws and explaining everything in clear English. So that they really understand what's gonna happen.
But we're also gonna have changes that are not gonna make everybody happy,
Of course.
and we're gonna have to solve them.
So, right,
Right.
I think it's really paramount that we explain what the downside is if we don't approve.
Right.
And in dollars and cents. It really,
And legal action.
yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
Attorney General's threatening us with fair housing laws and all of that.
Well, that's so true. And because there are towns that are saying they're not going to abide by this.
Right.
And the state has already started major legal action against them.
there's
Really?
only one town right now who's not in compliance.
Yes,
Begins with an H.
yes, it is. But there's another
Holliston,
town
maybe?
that has said they intend not to comply. I think they are naive. The best.
Is there evidence that state has started to move against that?
Yes,
But there's only one that didn't submit the paperwork now.
Only one,
Holliston, I think.
yeah.
It's the only one that refused to submit the,
Holliston?
it began with an H.
I don't think it's Holliston.
Okay,
And
I thought Middleborough
No.
was one.
no, they've since submitted the paper-
Middleborough actually already complies.
Yeah,
They adopted a 40R district. So they already comply, it was like a whole or something. And I think,
Holbrook maybe?
yeah, and I think Rockport started a suit, and
No, that wasn't the town, that was a group of residents.
that was a group of
who
residents,
hired a
and,
private attorney.
and as I understand, they're not gonna get too far.
No.
Yeah.
Just FYI, I think the town meeting is not April 1st.
Okay, well, is that gonna be voted on to change?
It's gonna
I
be voted on.
I said that and everybody said, oh, it's
No,
April
yeah.
1st.
It has to go to town meeting.
Or have
It
you
does
already?
not have to go to town meeting.
Oh, it doesn't?
It doesn't.
General bylaw.
It's in the general bylaw, but the select board has the ability
Okay.
to move the meeting. We've done so
Okay.
when it's conflicted with a religious holiday. We did so under COVID, but that was.
But I thought we
we
were gonna
still,
change it permanently.
we would like to change it permanently. I think we're just gonna do it this year on the select board's nickel. And if it in fact does make it easier to get the financials together, then we will put it together, put a bylaw together, bylaw change together for subsequent town
And
meeting.
what will the date be?
It's the Monday after school vacation.
I think it's.
Sorry.
So
So wait, is that in February?
I do.
April, it would be the end of
Right.
April.
Oh,
or
oh,
the
that's
beginning
what
of
that
May.
one.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Fourth Monday, I think, in April.
so it's like late April.
Late April.
And school vacation is always the week of Patriots Day, so that helps.
So it's like the 15th
Ah.
or 18th.
It's
or-
more like the 24th.
20 something.
Oh, okay.
To the end of. Thank you.
Okay, I'll look at that later. So is that pretty solid? Is,
I don't know whether it's solid, but we voted for it.
oh, okay, okay.
Tiffany, do you want to move on to phase 3?
Yes, sure. So communication tools in this phase are similar to phase 1. Okay, phase 3 will be the vote. That will be take place between communication on that will take place in engagement between May and November 2024. So it will be really important during this phase to communicate clearly and as early as possible exactly what residents will be voting on at town meeting.
I thought we were having an earlier vote.
There's a
Give a second
potential
shot.
for April. I guess these are the things that will be a little fluid because we don't know exactly yet.
You thought we were gonna have something for April?
No, I don't think we want it to be with the annual town meeting because it would make it too long, but she's saying phase 3 goes through November of 2024, which would mean we were not voting until
Yeah, we'd have to.
November, and that would give us only one
Right.
shot.
Are you saying you're thinking a special town meeting in the summer or something? Okay.
I mean, I
Let's
don't,
think about that.
I just.
I mean, I
don't-
can amend, that's what I mean, like, this is a little fluid. I didn't, we can, if that's what the task force decides, then I'll readjust this.
I'm concerned about the amount of time we have and also concerned about
Yeah.
putting it into the annual town meeting with everything else and making that
That's a
meeting go
very good
forever.
point.
Right.
Very
think,
good.
right.
So maybe it's a special town meeting after town meeting.
Or maybe the November town meeting is
June.
earlier in the summer or something, yeah,
June, July, I don't know, when everyone's gone.
right.
No.
Sarah.
Don't think of that.
So when we know what town meeting we're going to be proposing these zoning amendments, then it will be very important that we communicate the facts. And, that'll take having the zoning articles being finalized and no 11th hour changes being made. And that'll be really important because that's what causes confusion. And, the rush through is, I think, what gets people, makes people question and not feel maybe secure in their vote. So being as clear and as early as we can on that would be important. And then communicating, why the task force is proposing these changes. And what benefits, how will these benefit the town? And I think I meant by that, how will these preserve the town? How will they keep Manchester, comply with the state, yet preserve what we love about the town? And then if there are design guidelines that are written during this time, that will be important too. Outreach, similar idea to all of the meetings and public hearings that will be had during this time. And then a summer in-person public forum. There's multiple venue ideas. Then also attending some of the summer events, music in the park, circulating again when we know. And I had Manchester Club October, but depending on when this town meeting vote is, I will readjust the events that we circulate around to, because really phase 3 will be all about communicating what the articles are and what the proposed zoning amendments are. And really making people understand what they're going to be asked to vote on. That will be the whole goal of this last phase. And answering their questions and making sure they're clear and informed when they get to town meeting. And then hold a pre-town meeting, special public forum to go through each one again of the warrant articles and answer questions. We can add public forums as we go, as we receive information, but the public needs to understand and know about. Communication channels will remain the same and consistent. Project wrap up will be once we, when we submit to the state and we've chosen that we're going to comply and we have our report, that final version will communicate to residents and post to the website. So,
Tiffany, that was great.
Yes, I
Yes,
agree.
Thank you.
Fabulous.
So my other thing that only made me promise to do at this meeting, I've been doing this under promises to Olman. Okay, he said, try to get a sense of, is it a good idea to have a plan or no? So that's my question,
A plan about what?
about communicating our job here and trying to get this under control.
Of course,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
good idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
the answer is yes.
Okay.
It's even better to have a good plan.
Well, there are plans and there
Does
are plans.
anybody think we shouldn't have a plan?
Just wing it. Yeah.
Not for
Just wait and
this,
see what happens.
not for this.
well, and we'll make tweaks along the way. Things will change and slightly, but it is good to have structure
Yeah.
to start with. And
Well, I move that we adopt Tiffany's communication plan with a couple of tweaks that we discussed.
Yeah, I just think
Second.
phase 3 goes too late.
Yes.
And that-
Yeah.
Second.
Right.
All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay.
Who seconded that, please? Second,
Denny
Uh,
Hall,
Who's Paul?
thank you.
Geez, Gail, that was scary. You suddenly came in from the netherworld, asked us questions.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, good. Good. Okay, well, I suggest we approve the minutes from the last meeting. However, since I wasn't at the last meeting, I can't really vote for them. So if anybody else would like to suggest we approve the meeting for the last meeting, that would be great.
so moved.
second.
Favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting.
I have to abstain because I wasn't there.
I abstained because I wasn't.
I wasn't there. Okay, thank you. Then,
Gail, did you get the 3 abstentions? Sarah Melish, Gar, and Ann Harrison?
I did, thank you.
okay, the last item, you'll be happy to say, it's now 7:45, is the date of our next meeting. September 21st. And I am told your chairman will be back in place, so that's good.
Okay.
And that would be Thursday evening, September 21st. At 6:30. 6:30.
Yeah, we have a affordable housing trust from 4 to 6-ish. It's in the same room. So they gotta be out.
Okay,
I have a question about subcommittees,
yes,
because I wasn't here at last meeting, and that's when the subcommittees were discussed. I was hoping to be on a subcommittee that looked at possible zoning changes. It's not clear to me whether one exists or not.
I think we're all that.
I thought that's what we were all doing.
That's the
Yeah.
job of the whole.
So we're not gonna have a subcommittee.
well, I think
Well,
it's
Okay.
big.
I asked the question last meeting about what the exact mechanism by which we were going to arrive at these conclusions was. And if I understand it right, Betsy will correct me, we're going to have outside consultants who are going to provide us with suggestions. And then we are going to think
Debate.
about those and debate them
But I
and
think,
send them back.
I think we need
back.
brainstorming
I would agree with you. Stan.
internally. I think
I would agree. With you.
I think we need to be creative, go outside the box and look at possibilities and say, okay, what's the upside and what's the downside and narrow things down.
Yes.
It would seem to me that we as a group should be giving some pretty substantial guidelines and maybe multiple sets of guidelines, go this way or go this way or go this way. And then let them come back with their own ideas too. But my concern last week was this iteration going back and forth between an external consultant and this group
Who doesn't know
is
our
going to
town?
really limit how many,
It's gonna slow things down.
slow them down enormously. Slow them down enormously and wind up forcing maybe not the optimum choice. So
And
I don't know,
also-
when do we think we will have such a consultant in place able to work with us on that?
Probably by mid-October.
Well, we're already under the gun,
Yeah,
to your point. And we need to come up with some strategies whereby we can accelerate some of these decisions, at least on a subcommittee basis is I think a good suggestion. Because you know, trying to get stuff done with these number of people is a challenge.
So you think maybe have a few people go off and come back with some ideas of
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, the biggest obstacle we have though is we don't know what the data is yet. We don't have it in hand. Once it's in hand, then we can put our foot to pedal to the metal.
You
Sandy,
don't
I think we
need
got
the
time.
data, you don't need all the data, I don't think. I mean, we have existing zoning bylaws. We can look at those and we can say, okay, what tweaks would need to be done to make things comply? And just look at it and say, okay, and then look at the data and say, okay, is that feasible or not? The data's 75% of the lots in Manchester are non-conforming. You have to do something. You have to change
Right, you have to
something.
make them conforming.
You
or
have
some
to
of
do
them
something, and
conform.
I don't think the data is gonna give you much.
There are some real big questions we have to answer.
Right.
One of the big questions is how much of this is in the downtown district and how much of it is not. There's a huge amount of area within that half-mile circle that is 1 and 2 acre zoning.
Right.
Do we automatically assume that we are going to visit this upon what is already the densest part? In fact, if you want to make this zoning affect the most people, then you'll put it right downtown. That will be the choice that has a negative impact on the most people. So all of those, I mean, maybe that's where we have to go. But all I'm saying is, I think it would be well worth our while to start doing some sketched up ideas downtown, out of downtown, looking for all this, and just to see where it winds up. I think that's a great idea, Sarah.
So,
And I think you're right. I think you're right. It's probably a subcommittee is the only way it would happen.
so starting next week, there is a group of students from MIT coming in, and they will be looking at this issue of MBTA zoning, among other things. And supposedly several students are urban design students. And they will, one of the things they are going to be tasked with is basically looking at visuals.
I get scared when I hear the word urban design. Cause we're not exactly urban.
No,
Yeah,
no, no.
it's a misnomer, but it's the category that applies to this process. But urban has nothing to do with our town. I agree.
Who are these?
It's a bad
guys,
lead.
Reporting to, working for?
For Greg and the new town planner who will be coming in. And I will be kind of filling the gap.
When is the new town planner coming?
I'm
in?
not sure.
Yeah, but is there somebody that's been identified
Somebody has been identified,
and
Is-
is
is going to be on, not accepted yet,
Oh, so it's to be determined.
to be, well,
So what does everybody feel? Should we think about suggesting a subcommittee for a sort of preliminary zoning, what do they call it, a charrette or something, you know, thinking about zoning? If that were to be in place, I would suggest we get a very, very smart zoning attorney to be part of that. Group.
I think we need creative ideas first before
Yeah.
we get to the zoning attorney.
Well, one of the questions I would have for a zoning attorney would be, can we do the effectively spot zoning of existing non-conforming units and get away with it?
5 acre minimum.
I mean, that question could be asked of Jonathan Murray, who is working for KP Law. And he's the KP Law guru on this process. So I think there's your answer on, you know, a good zoning attorney.
You have a very clear question. You have a very clear authority. Could
Okay,
somebody put the two of those together?
I can,
Thank you.
yeah,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna suggest we, this is not gonna be popular, that we appoint a temporary zoning subcommittee, which would be open to anybody who wants to be on that committee. And, that Sarah and Denny would, take responsibility for herding that group, and that would have a life of probably a month, something like that.
So,
They used to be much longer than that, guy.
well, but the idea is to come up with ideas that can be discussed and debated, and then by that time, the consultant will be on board and hopefully can help.
I'm not willing to throw all my eggs in a basket with a consultant. I mean, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, I don't blame you.
But
I-
even so, starting now with people from this group, then we're in a stronger position when we
Correct.
face.
Right, well, we have the consultant.
Yes.
Okay,
So, I mean, and maybe the month or a month and a half life gets extended. If we use the paddles and bring it back to life.
Well, this is a process that we're just gonna have to feel our way through.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, feeling our way through sometimes means we don't do it anything.
Well,
And we gotta
No,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's the right thing to do, but we'll just adjust,
Well,
we'll just adjust.
can we be clear? So the purpose of the group is to come up with ideas to raise to the group for
Right,
debate
right.
and
well, no,
deliberation.
to do more work than that, not just come up with ideas, but to actually look at the zoning bylaw and see, okay, how might that change it and what might the consequences be? So there's something a little more concrete. And the task force can say, oh, no, that's a bad idea. We don't like those consequences.
Right, well, you can't even begin to see, right, you can't begin to think about an idea until you begin to understand the consequences.
Right,
I mean, that
yeah,
goes all
right,
together
yeah.
without saying.
I would suggest adding Richard to that.
Oh, no, not Richard, no way.
My reputation.
Okay, okay.
Um,
I'll go along with it. I think it'd be great. And I think with a limited life, we put a little pressure on these guys. You have a couple of meetings, come up with some ideas. get
Open meeting
Jonathan
law.
Murray.
Yes,
Okay,
it is open meeting law, right?
open meeting law, thank you.
so we have to have agendas, we have to have schedules, we have to have
Posting.
posting, we have, right, and we have to have minutes.
And it has to be open to
Yeah.
anyone from the
Yeah.
task force who
Fine.
wants to show up. Yeah,
Anyone at all.
right, but to participate.
Okay. Any sense, people think we really shouldn't do this? Or,
Well, it's gonna put some responsibility on somebody, because somebody's gonna have to be responsible for dealing with all of this complication of.
I can do that because I do that for
Just like-
multiple committees
Just
now.
like-
You do that for a living.
Well, that's
Yeah,
great, that's great.
it's not a huge deal, as long as you,
okay,
we just have to have
Gar, if I may suggest,
Yes.
having two people in charge is not necessarily,
I know.
She's saying just make Sarah in charge?
Yeah, but I want to make sure that we don't sort of put Sarah in and she's the czarina of zoning. I realize that's a.
That's nice.
That's a. Yeah, I don't want to have one person be the czarina of zoning.
No, I think,
really want to have it spread
right,
a little bit.
I
And
think
no-
it's
Well,
just
yeah.
one person to do the agendas and to pull the
Okay.
meetings
Okay.
together. Right?
Is that okay?
It may be
In conjunction-
advantageous to have the building inspector who's going to help interpret zoning to attend the meetings as well.
That would be a good idea. I'll leave that to folks to do. Any other commentary? And what else did I do? Anything? No?
oh, you did lots of things. All of them great.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
All right.
Return. No comment.